intellectual, and financial capital were motivated as well for the purely sadistic pleasure of creating existential nightmares without end for their victims. I would need to extricate myself from their power fairly soon before it increased. They had thus far reduced my potential tensors of egress from this four-dimensional coordinate significantly. In situations like this, the realization occurs that what had been a fairly usual situation continues to transition into the extreme. Once I had sought to make an analogy for the development schedule of this progress, so I thought it was as if I were standing about minding my own affairs while someone commenced to insert a plank beneath my feet. Then they began to profit from the sale and placement of plank extensions. It would thus happen that in this daydream at the edge, while I was conversing with a friend or contemplating sundry philosophical affairs, I would begin moving farther and farther beyond the edge upon some perfidious plank quite innocently. Perhaps after some interval and some appreciable increase of danger, I would notice that I was far beyond the edge of stability, and a plank construction team in the distance was busily buying and installing planks for profit. In what way did such environmental determinism respond to my free will and indeterminate desires? Having had enough of the battlestorm tensor threatening to break, I stepped inside the extra-dimensional shelter of the portal of piss that closed abruptly behind me like a powerful river flowing horizontally. To the forces of the battlestorm beyond, the closure of the extra-dimensional extrusion may have seemed frustrating, for I left my demolition card at the threshold, eliminating the hyperdimensional address to what lay beyond. It must have closed like an anus extruding a large field of gas before collapse. In the Earth time period of the 1950s, 1960s Christian era, a Cold War political battle between two hemispheres of the planet raged like a virus, infecting human social progress, adversely diverting resources into war material. One side waged totalitarianism in support of the masses, who would have no rights of dissent, while the other supported political freedom for the masses to enable concentrating wealth and power for the rich. Initially, they believed they were defending individual freedom and enterprise. One presidential assassin named Lee Harvey Oswald was a United States Marine, an intelligence and language specialist who served the cause of popular domination by the rich, yet who at the height of the Cold War seemed to defect temporarily to the side of totalitarian domination of the populace by an elite in order that the masses might be protected from oppression by the rich overseas. Lee Harvey Oswald's personally ambiguous mission to Moscow drew the attention of the State Security Force of the Soviet era in the Soviet Union, known as the KGB. He was taken into captivity and given advanced, for the time, neuropsychogenic programming, enabling him to have the right subconscious suggestions to move him toward fulfilling a desire to kill John F. Kennedy, the American president of inherited wealth. The involuntary psychological conditioning of Oswald by the KGB was one of the deepest and most closely guarded secrets of the third directorate of the former Soviet Union. It was eventually the reason for the untimely death of a former Soviet premier, one Yuri Andropov. Records of the training of Oswald were eliminated from KGB archives. Even in the post-Cold War era, no trace of programming of the Kennedy assassination team from Syria were to emerge, but I saw it all in a hyperdimensional holographic history mem as I waited, stuck for a few minutes inside the entrance to other universes. For some reason, my Applebaum liked old history videos. She had also placed the historically corresponding events of the real secret history of Procopius and others on flat dimension inward recursion symmetry breaking screens. Standing here in the anteroom of End Dimensions, watching dubiously accurate historical videos, I have occasion to consider more of the meanings of language and of language symbols. Humanity, after all, had its huge watershed divide moment with the invention of written language when it became possible to capture meanings for later use in frozen or ossified symbols. Language used before the invention of writing may have been more restricted to live behavioral meaning or mimicking of language using behavior in practice during the language learning phase. That would be a naturalist era of language use. Perhaps there was no realistic or deterministic element to language development or use a couple of 100,000 years ago in the earliest era of the existence of Homo sapiens.